Section 1 of The True History of Pepper's Ghost. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Stunning. The True History of Pepper's Ghost by John Henry Pepper. Introduction. Polytechnic, 309 Regent Street, London, W. Christmas, 1889. To Walter Hughes, Esquire. Messrs. Hughes, Masterman, and Rue, 59 New Broad Street. My dear Sir, will you allow me to dedicate this little work to you, as some small recognition of the patience, care, and legal knowledge you displayed in bringing to a successful issue the difficult proceedings before the Attorney General, Sir Rondell Palmer, now Lord Selborne, and also those in Chancery, connected with the sealing of my ghost patent by order of the late Lord Chancellor Westbury in September 1863. With a grateful sense of the personal kindness and attention I have received from yourself and the other members of your firm, I am, my dear sir, your old client and sincere friend, the author. End of section 1.
Section 2 of The True History of Pepper's Ghost. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The True History of Pepper's Ghost by John Henry Pepper. Part 1. The True History of the Ghost. When the Hyde Park Second Great Exhibition in 1862 had closed its doors, and the reaction from the bustle attendant on the arrival and departure of country visitors had set in, so that the halls and lecture rooms lately crowded with the numerous patrons of the old Royal Polytechnic were somewhat deserted, there came to the aid of the Institute a new invention, which people, by common consent, called the ghost. The latter was matured in this wise. Mr. Dirks, a patent agent, who had saved some property and was an independent man, wrote a paper for the Athenaeum Literary Journal, in which he described an optical effect that could be performed with sheets of glass. This paper excited no attention because the explanation of it was somewhat vague and unsatisfactory. The Christmas of 1862 was fast approaching when Messrs. Horne, Thornthwaite, and Wood, philosophical instrument makers of Newgate Street, invited the author to see a model which Mr. Dirks had caused to be constructed. This was the beginning of the ghost. But as Mr. Dirks said that an entirely new theater must be built to show the effects which he allowed could only be seen by a few people placed in an upper gallery, and then only by daylight, it was no wonder that the Crystal Palace, the Colosseum, and other places had all declined to have anything to do with Mr. Dirks or his model, which was now placed in the hands of Professor Pepper, so called because the directors of the then Royal Polytechnic had determined that his title should be Professor of Chemistry and Honorary Director of the above institution. The title was not that of a hairdresser or a dancing master, but was conferred upon him by express minute of the Board of Directors. Professor Pepper had had his services in establishing classes at the Royal Polytechnic already recognized by the authorities at South Kensington, who gave him an honorary diploma in physics and chemistry of the Committee of Council on Education some 2 or 3 years before the ghost was brought out, and at a time when he was sole lessee of the Polytechnic at a rental of £2,480 per annum, which had to be paid before a single lecture or entertainment was brought before the public. The classes Mr. Pepper established were for the study of drawing, French, German, arithmetic, and mathematics, with, of course, chemistry and physics. And pupils were admitted at very low fees in order to encourage the working men to attend. He also arranged Monday evening lectures for the working classes, and reduced the admission to 6 pence if the workmen came with proper tickets supplied by Professor Pepper, but signed by the foreman under whom the men worked. All this took place about the years 1858 to 59, and was continued until the Institute finally closed its doors, principally caused by the fall of the stone staircase, and sold all off to a new limited liability company when Mr. Pepper was giving courses of lectures at the Crystal Palace, Sydenham. Again, for the last time and during the absence of Professor Pepper in Australia, where he stopped 10 years, viz. from 1879 to 1889, a sale of the plant and machinery, etc., of the Royal Polytechnic took place on the 28th of February and 3 following days in 1882. Mr. George Buckland and his friends tried to secure the lease by purchase, but, not completing the purchase in time, it was bought by Quinton Hogg, Esquire, who has greatly added to the size of the building, which is chiefly devoted to classes, at least 50 in number, teaching all kinds of useful knowledge, with a large day school for boys, who are numbered by hundreds, and are well and most efficiently taught by competent masters. The laboratory has also been enlarged, and is now under the able guidance of Mr. Ward, the teacher of chemistry and physics. But to return to the Christmas of 1862, ever memorable in the annals of the Institute because Mr. Pepper brought out the illusion in quite a different manner from that contemplated by Mr. Dirks, and so improved and simplified the ghost that it could be shown in any lecture hall or theater, if sufficiently large to contain the necessary apparatus. The following is a narrative from the lips of the inventor of the ghost improvement. Just before Christmas Day in 1862, I invited a number of literary and scientific friends, and my always kind supporters, the members of the press, to a private view of the new illusion to be introduced into Bulwer's romantic and dramatic literary creation, called A Strange Story. The effect of the first appearance of the apparition on my illustrious audience was startling in the extreme, and far beyond anything I could have hoped for and expected. So much so that, although I had previously settled to explain the whole modus operandi on that evening, I deferred doing so, and went the next day to Messrs. Carp Mail, the patent agents, and took out a provisional patent for the ghost illusion, in the names, at my request, of Dirks and Pepper. The day after the first evening I showed the ghost, Mr. Dirks came down to the Polytechnic, and after saying how much pleased he was with the manner in which I had introduced the illusion, ended by handing me a letter, in which he spoke highly of my work in respect of the ghost, and gave me spontaneously whatever profits might accrue from the invention. Moreover, he went to Carp Mail with me, and, being an old and experienced patent agent himself, assisted in drawing up the patent which is here copied, with my original drawing of the improved method of showing the ghost by the use of a double stage at the old Royal Polytechnic Institute. End of Section 2. Read by Marissa D. 6, Clearwater, Florida, March 2nd, 2024. Section 3 of The True History of Pepper's Ghost. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The True History of Pepper's Ghost by John Henry Pepper, Part 2. A.D. 1863, 5th of February, number 326. Apparatus for exhibiting dramatic and other performances. Letters patent to Henry Dirks of Blackheath in the county of Kent, civil engineer, and John Henry Pepper of number 309 Regent Street in the county of Middlesex, professor of chemistry and honorary director of the Polytechnic Institution for the invention of improvements in apparatus to be used in the exhibition of dramatic and other like performances. Sealed the 25th of September, 1863, in pursuance of an order of the Lord Chancellor, and dated the 5th of February, 1863. Provisional specification left by the said Henry Dirks and John Henry Pepper at the office of the Commissioners of Patents, with their petition on the 5th of February, 1863. We, Henry Dirks, of Blackheath, in the county of Kent, civil engineer, and John Henry Pepper, of number 309 Regent Street, in the county of Middlesex, professor of chemistry and honorary director of the Polytechnic Institution, do hereby declare the nature of the invention for improvements in apparatus to be used in the exhibition of dramatic and other like performances to be as follows. The object of our said invention is by a peculiar arrangement of apparatus to associate on the same stage a phantom or phantoms with a living actor or actors, so that the two may act in concert, but which is only an optical illusion as respects the one or more phantoms so introduced. The arrangement of the theater requires, in addition to the ordinary stage, a second stage at a lower level than the ordinary one, hidden from the audience as far as direct vision is concerned. This hidden stage is to be strongly illuminated by artificial light, and is capable of being rendered dark instantaneously, whilst the ordinary stage and the theater remain illuminated by ordinary lighting. A large glass screen is placed on the ordinary stage and in front of the hidden one. The spectators will not observe the glass screen, but will see the actors on the ordinary stage through it as if it were not there. Nevertheless, the glass will serve to reflect to them an image of the actors on the hidden stage when these are illuminated, but this image will be made immediately to disappear by darkening the hidden stage. The glass screen is set in a frame so that it can readily be moved to the place required, and it is to be set at an inclination to enable the spectators, whether in the pit, boxes, or gallery, to see the reflected image. The glass is adjustable, and it is readily adjusted to the proper inclination by having a person in the pit and another in the gallery to inform the party who is adjusting the glass when they see the image correctly. Specification filed in pursuance of the conditions of the letters patent and of an order of the Lord Chancellor by the said Henry Dirks and John Henry Pepper in the Great Seal Patent Office on the 31st of October, 1863. To all to whom these presents shall come, we, Henry Dirks of Blackheath in the county of Kent, civil engineer, and John Henry Pepper of number 309 Regent Street in the county of Middlesex, professor of chemistry and honorary director of the Polytechnic Institution, send greeting. Whereas Her Most Excellent Majesty Queen Victoria, by her letters patent, bearing date the 5th day of February, in the year of our Lord 1863, in the 26th year of her reign, did, for herself, her heirs and successors, give and grant unto us, the said Henry Dirks and John Henry Pepper, her special license that we, the said Henry Dirks and John Henry Pepper, our executors, administrators, and assigns, or such others as we, the said Henry Dirks and John Henry Pepper, our executors, administrators, and assigns, should at any time agree with, and no others, from time to time and at all times thereafter during the term therein expressed, should and lawfully might make, use, exercise, and vend within the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland, the Channel Islands, and Isle of Man, an invention for improvements in apparatus to be used in the exhibition of dramatic and other like performances, upon the condition, amongst others, that we, the said Henry Dirks and John Henry Pepper, our executors or administrators, by an instrument in writing under our or their hands and seals, or under the hand and seal of one of us or them, should particularly describe and ascertain the nature of the said invention, and in what manner the same was to be performed, and cause the same to be filed in the Great Seal Patent Office on or before the 3rd day of November, in the year of our Lord 1863. Now know ye that I, the said John Henry Pepper, on behalf of myself and the said Henry Dirks, do hereby declare the nature of the said invention, and in what manner the same is to be performed, to be particularly described and ascertained in and by the following statement thereof. That is to say, the nature and object of our said invention is by a peculiar arrangement of apparatus to associate on the same stage a phantom or phantoms with a living actor or actors, so that the two may act in concert, but which is only an optical illusion as respects the one or more phantoms so introduced. The arrangement of the theater requires, in addition to the ordinary stage, a second stage at a lower level than the ordinary one, hidden from the audience as far as direct vision is concerned. This hidden stage is to be strongly illuminated by artificial light, and is capable of being rendered dark instantaneously, whilst the ordinary stage and the theater remain illuminated by ordinary lighting. A large glass screen is placed on the ordinary stage and in front of the hidden one. The spectators will not observe the glass screen, but will see the actors on the ordinary stage through it as if it were not there. Nevertheless, the glass will serve to reflect to them an image of the actors on the hidden stage when these are illuminated, but this image will be made immediately to disappear by darkening the hidden stage. The glass screen is set in a frame so that it can readily be moved to the place required, and it is to be set at an inclination to enable the spectators, whether in the pit, boxes, or gallery, to see the reflected image. The glass is adjustable, and it is readily adjusted to the proper inclination by having a person in the pit and another in the gallery, to inform the party who is adjusting the glass when they see the image correctly. Having thus stated the nature of our invention, we will proceed more fully to describe the manner of performing the same. End of Section 3. Read by Marissa D. Six, Clearwater, Florida, March 2nd, 2024.
Section 4 of The True History of Pepper's Ghost. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This is chromiumjade, The True History of Pepper's Ghost by John Henry Pepper. Description of the drawings. Descriptions of the drawings, Figure 1, Frontispiece. Figure 1 of the annexed drawings illustrates the arrangement of a theater for carrying our invention into effect. The figure shows a section taken through the stage, the orchestra, the pit, and gallery. AA is an opening which is formed in the ordinary stage. In the front part of the stage, but at a lower level, is the hidden stage B. The opening A is capable of being closed at the top by trapdoors, a plan of which is shown at Figure 2. When the trapdoors are closed, actors on the ordinary or visible stage can pass freely to and fro from above the lower or hidden stage. The ordinary stage and trapdoors are covered with green baize or other dark material, so that when the trapdoors are opened, the audience, even those in the gallery, will not readily be able to perceive the opening. The actors or objects corresponding with the phantom images, which it is desired to represent to the audience, are on the lower or hidden stage B, and are strongly illuminated by the limelight or the electric light, or other powerful illuminating means may be employed. This light must accompany the actor in any movement he has to make. This hidden stage B and the lantern C may be mounted on a carriage on rails, a plan of which is shown at Figure 3, so that when it is necessary for the phantom actor or object on the lower stage to be moved, the lanterns may be caused to move also, or the lanterns may remain stationary whilst the actor moves, provided the whole space through which he moves is sufficiently illuminated. The lanterns are to be provided with means for instantaneously extinguishing or masking the light, and for reproducing it so that the phantom may be made to disappear and reappear at pleasure, whilst the audience and the ordinary stage will be more or less lighted in the ordinary manner according to the effects desired to be obtained. For this purpose a board B1 is employed, which is capable of being raised into the position shown by dotted lines so as to entirely cut off the light from the hidden stage when desired, or an ordinary opaque shade attached to each lantern may be used for the purpose, or when using the limelight the desired effects are caused by gradually or instantaneously, as the case may require, cutting off the supply of gases, and the phantom image may be any of these means be caused gradually or instantaneously to fade away. When the trapdoors over the hidden stage are open, the part D thereof assists in hiding the lanterns and the opening from the audience. The part E is raised into the position shown in the drawing and acts, together with the part D, to screen the lanterns from the audience, and also to ensure that any actor or object on the hidden stage shall not accidentally appear above the level of the visible stage. The phantom actor, when standing on stage B, leans against screen K, which is inclined so as to be parallel with the glass screen, and is covered with black velvet or other dark material, as is the stage B, in order that no image of either the screen K or the stage B may be seen in the reflection. F, the glass screen, is a large sheet of plate glass on the ordinary stage, of sufficient size to reflect the full length of the actors or objects on the hidden stage to the audience in the pit, boxes, and galleries of the theater. The hidden stage is between the glass and the audience. Glass may be mounted in a swing frame so that it may be adjusted to the angle required, or it may be readily done by screws or ropes and pulleys or otherwise. The glass screen is to be set at such an inclination as to bring the reflected image to the level of the visible or ordinary stage. This will enable the spectators, whether in pit, boxes, or gallery, to see the reflected image without any obstruction to the view above the footlights, and it will be visible from all parts of the house, except for those extreme positions which cannot command a view through the glass of that part of the stage where the image is reflected. The proper angle of inclination of the glass is ascertained experimentally by having persons in the different parts of the house to say when the image is shown to them correctly. The scene is so disposed as to conceal the frame of the glass, and we prefer that the glass be able to descend into an opening or box G beneath the stage, in which case we counterbalance the glass and frame so that they may be easily raised into the position desired by the means of a rope H, by which, aided by the bolts I, the glass is supported in the required position. The glass may be either adjusted when screened from the audience and remain in position during the scene, or, the proper angle of inclination having been previously ascertained by experiment, the glass may be raised onto the ordinary or visible stage and placed in the position whilst the scene is before the eyes of the audience under a subdued light without the movement being observed, for which latter purpose the top bar of the frame of the glass should be made very light or be omitted altogether. This arrangement admits of an actor on the visible stage passing across the space which the glass is to occupy, and this he can do just before the appearance of the phantom, and then immediately the glass is run up, the trapdoors are opened, the actor or image on the hidden stage is illuminated, and the phantom appears. This arrangement will render it less likely that the audience should imagine that there is anything interposed between them and the actors than if the glass plate remained permanently in the position during the scene. The hidden or lower stage may be provided with a well or a hole up which an actor can rise. He will then appear as a spectre rising out of the visible stage. The lanterns may be provided with colored glasses in order to heighten the effect. As the actors on the visible stage do not themselves see the spectral images, marks should be placed on the stage or other indications made in order that they may know the position which the spectres appearing to the audience are to occupy. In order to appear upright upon the visible stage, the actor or object on the hidden stage should be inclined so as to be nearly as practicable parallel with the surface of the glass screen. In effecting this assistance is afforded by the screen K of the hidden stage. Several sheets of glass may be similarly employed at the same time if one is not of sufficient width to cover the different parts of the stage at which it is desired that the spectre should appear, the interval or junction being concealed by the introduction of a tree or column or some other piece of scenery. Having thus described the nature of our invention and the manner of performing the same, we would have it understood that we make no claim to any of the parts separately, but what we claim is the combined arrangement as herein described of a glass inclined forward towards the audience, and two stages, one the ordinary visible stage, and the other a hidden stage at a lower level than the ordinary visible stage, and illuminated with a much stronger light than either the ordinary visible stage or the body of the house, in which light is capable of being instantaneously, or if so required, gradually withdrawn and restored. In witness thereof I, the said John Henry Pepper, have hereunto set my hand and seal, this 31st day of October, in the year of our Lord 1863. J. H. Pepper, L.S. End of section 4. Section 5 of The True History of Pepper's Ghost. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This is Chromiumjade, The True History of Pepper's Ghost by John Henry Pepper. Returning to the author's narrative, the ghost illusion was first shown in what was called the Small Theatre of the Royal Polytechnic, but as the audience increased so rapidly, it was removed by the following Easter and shown on a grander scale in the large theatre of the institution where the dissolving views were usually exhibited. The late Mr. O'Connor of the Haymarket painted the first scene used representing the laboratory of the haunted man, which Christmas story the late Charles Dickens, by his special written permission, allowed me to use for the illustration of the ghost illusion. This ghost scene ran for 15 months and helped realize in a very short time the sum of £12,000, not counting what I received for granting licenses to use the ghost, and also the sums realized during the many successive years as new ghost stories were brought out. Sylvester now patented the use of looking-glass in the performance of the ghost, which I thought was very good, and bought off him, and he could only infringe my patent by attempting to use it, and therefore his patent was useless to anybody else but myself. Mr. King of Bath brought out what he termed a new patent ghost, but my solicitors, Messrs. Hughes, Masterman and Hughes, very soon quashed the alleged patent by appearing against Mr. King, when he tried to get his patent passed before the Solicitor General, the result of which is described by the London New Music Hall Journal. Manchester, August 10th, 1863. Withdrawal of the ghost from the London Music Hall. It is with unfeigned regret that I have to announce to my numerous patrons the withdrawal of the ghost from the London New Music Hall. The reason is as follows. My engagement with Mr. King, to whom a large sum of money was paid down, was with the understanding that he should personally superintend the first representation of the great optical illusion, The Marvelous Ghost, which, however, he failed to do, and to which is attributable to the failure and disappointment which ensued. I also distinctly understood that his representation was free from any infringement of the right to patent, and that it was in every respect equal to the original production of Professor Pepper. I beg, therefore, in order to acquit myself from the odium of disappointment which may have been felt by the unusually large attraction which it occasioned to the London during the past week, to state that I have received an intimation from Professor Pepper that Mr. King's representation is an infringement upon his own, and that I have no course left open to me but at once to bear the disappointment, and allow its immediate withdrawal. It is my intention, however, to seek redress in the proper quarter. I therefore trust that my numerous friends will see the predicament in which I have been placed, and readily acquit me of all blame, assuring them that I am at all times, regardless of expense, anxious to secure the most sterling talent that can be procured, and to avoid anything in the shape of disappointment. James Harwood. I now introduce a miniature ghost of a danseuse, which being only about 15 inches high, danced on the stage to the great amusement of my very numerous kind patrons. I took out a provisional patent for this addition to the Ghost Mysteries, and shall reproduce it this Christmas at the Polytechnic. A Manchester man, under the nom de plume of Kit Skewift, thus ridicules the efforts made by King to produce the ghost at Manchester. To ghost! When I were a lad, but that weren't yesterday, nor the day before, nor any day last week, I used to be treated now and then to what were called a good ghost story. Old folk then were vast fond of tickling young folks' ears with tales about hobgoblins, ghosts, carnivorous giants, vampires, ogres, and all macks of uncouth beings. I really believe that they thought such tales were profitable, morally and religiously speaking, and had little thought about the uproar they caused among our juvenile nerves. Well, I can remember how being now and then frightened till it was the hardest job in the world to keep my heart from rising up in my mouth or scattering down into clugs. My ear would have stood up like bristles of a leaden brush, and on the best comb that ever were made would have fallen victim to any attempt to smooth it down to its gradly place. Nay, I believe if anybody had tried with their pair of curling tongues to make it twist, they'd have broken 'em like old chips. These tales given me no particular notion as to what ghosts were. Perhaps the tellers had no very clear idea themselves, but I get sort of a general inkling of what they were very queer, very extraordinary, and very wilful set of beings. Some vast fond of tidy practical joke, and all in the element when they were pottering folks' plucks to make out what the dickens they meant by their merlicks. For some days the good folks of the city of Manchester had been before up in the ways, up in the window shops, bills printed in black and flaring red ink, the letters big enough welly for a blind temp to see, announcing at the London Music Hall the appearance of a marvellous ghost, King's ghost, as a rival to that of Professor Pepper. Like all curious folk, I'd made hungry with expectation. I went the other night to have a look at it, imagining, as I went along through the streets, that at last I should get some peep at a spectre who's carried back my mind to my young days, and give me some insight into the nature and essence of spirits, not such as one benights the counter at a vault, but such as proceed from the clay tenement that lies motionless, decaying within. I don't know, but I felt a bit serious, too, and a bit touchy-griped with fear, for it met with a seat that would be doubly awful by the appearance of my granny's ghost. If it were, and who'd seed me, who'd be sure to give me a blistering of her tongue, for who were a rattler at taking the shay out of me with that glib little member of hers? But when the ghost did appear, or should have appeared in its full proportions, by to mak and fall myself as far as the possession of a genuine crumb of ghostly wisdom as ever I were my born days, it should have been an illustrious ghost, no less a chap than old Hamlet, the sovereign and ancient Denmark, and therefore a real king's ghost, about patent. But that may account for its beavishness, its tricks, and its uncommon way of introducing itself. It wouldn't appear all at once. At first it showed its head, then giving itself a wry neck, it lugged in its shoulders and its breast, then it disappeared, and shortly begun to ascend with its legs and its feet, or else a pair as it had borrowed from a neighbouring corpse uppermost. And when it gotten so far in its seat as its sternum, it flitted about in an ungracious manner, as if trying to dance the cure on its head. Perhaps it were because it was a king's ghost that it were so wilful, and tried to be so unnatural in its ways. For some of the old kings were rum jockeys, For aught we know, old Hamlet be like old George III, who Byron says get into the heaven by mistake, with his head under his arm, not having any use for it in a place where good thoughts and good principles are alone acceptable. Old Hamlet may be labouring under the idea that Lancashire were a place in which a chap would be of much service to his fellow creatures when standing on his head as when reared up in his usual style on his feet. This ghostly business is called an optical illusion. Should it be called an optical delusion? I know we never seed so many pairs of optics so nicely chatteled as there were on the occasion. Professor Buck's conjurations we know beforehand are naught but deceptions, but all be flogged if there ain't a way of bamboozling one's wits, and making sense of the seat confugal o' all other senses. He isn't far-eyed, old King's ghost, a very prince beside a regular muff. Now Pepper's ghosts, they say, are genuine, or what they profess to be, fine specimens of what true science and professional skill can accomplish. When all the whole bevy of King's ghosts are mustered, they're not, placed alongside o' Pepper's with so much as a pinch of salt, though by the way they were caught old birds, they met with a large stock on hand of the latter article. But mind you, I don't blame Mr. Harwood the less of the whole. No, not I. He, I understood, has been done as well, near to a bigger tune than the public, that he's doubly vexed to think that he should, aiming at producing every novelty that's presenting to the public, pay his good money for a bad ghost. And all the professionals engaged to the establishment, it mun be awfully mortifying, for what gives him the horrors more than an ominous conviction that the ghost will not walk? However, if I'm rightly informed, the King's ghost is to vanish when Pepper's is to appear in its place. This shows a determination not to be done with a powsy jack-o'-lantern. By the Music Hall Journal, I see too that Stead, the original Cure, and Master Ware, the author of so many comic songs, are to appear next week. Both of these chaps I seed in London when I went to look at the exhibition. On my word, if they do not make Lancashire folk laugh away all unpleasant dreams and shift the bile left by the ghost, I'm no judge, that's all. So there's no need to despair. As Shakespeare says, shadows avant, and make way for substantial entertainments. Yours gradly, August 7th, 1863, Kit Skewift. Section 6 of The True History of Pepper's Ghost. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This is chromiumjade, The True History of Pepper's Ghost by John Henry Pepper. Towards the end of May 1863, the audiences increased enormously at the Royal Polytechnic, so that it became necessary to have a select afternoon performance, the admission fee being raised from 1 shilling to 2 shillings 6 on Saturday mornings only. It was at this period that I was honoured with a visit from their Royal Highnesses, the Prince and Princess of Wales and suite, and after the performance had been witnessed by them, I showed the Prince and Princess how the ghost was raised and explained to my distinguished audience all the machinery and appliances used. Some of the suite amused the Prince by becoming ghosts, and the following notice appeared the next morning in the Times, May 20th, 1863. Yesterday morning, by special command, Professor Pepper had the honor of delivering his ghost lecture before the Royal Highnesses, the Prince and Princess of Wales, and the Prince and Princess Louis of Hesse, who were attended by the Countess of Macclesfield, Baroness von Schenk, Major Teasdale, and Captain Westerweller. The distinguished party were received by Professor Pepper, and after being conducted round the galleries, passed to the large theatre where a commodious royal box had been prepared for their reception. At the conclusion of the lecture, by the invitation of Professor Pepper, they went behind the scenes and examined with much interest the machinery and appliances for producing the Polytechnic ghost. At the conclusion, their Royal Highnesses graciously thanked the directors of the institution, and after shaking hands with Professor Pepper, retired. The Times, May 20th, London, England. The ghosts of the Polytechnic, which manifest themselves as a startling appendix to Mr. Pepper's strange lecture on optical illusions, have proved singularly attractive, and when the hour arrives for their appearance, the lecture room becomes as crowded as the pit of a theatre on the night of Boxing Day. Second notice. The time is January 20th, London, England. The real element of success in the production of the strange story, however, must be assigned to the ghost. So many base and servile imitators now appeared with a sorry imitation of the Polytechnic ghost that it became necessary to send the following advertisements to all the London papers. Advertisement. Cautions to persons pirating Professor Pepper's ghost. Messrs. Dirks and Pepper are the sole patentees of the ghost invention. The third and last hearing took place before Sir Rondell Palmer, the Solicitor General, on Saturday, the 15th August, 1863, when he decided in favor of Messrs. Dirks and Pepper. I also addressed the following letter to the press. Polytechnic Institution, 309 Regent Street, London, 21st August, 1863. To the editors of blank. Sir, on public grounds, I venture to call your attention to the fact that many persons are now going about the country endeavoring to pirate effects to be produced by the apparatus patented by Mr. Dirks and myself, and to deceive the public by giving them an exhibition with which they are certain to be disgusted, and with which I have nothing to do. I beg to enclose one of the numerous statements I have received from different parts of the country alluding to the imposture now so commonly practiced. I shall esteem it a favor if you would insert this and the accompanying statement in your valuable journal. I am, sir, your obedient servant, John Henry Pepper. I won all the cases taken into court against persons using my name in a fraudulent manner, and in one flagrant instance, the magistrates gave the impostor 14 days' imprisonment for getting money under false pretenses. The famous savant, Monsieur l'Abbé Moigny of Paris, wrote the brief notice of the ghost, which is here copied from his journal called Le Monde, May 1863. Nouvelles effets divers. Royal Polytechnique Institution. Les énergiques directeurs de l'institution Royale Polytechnique ont inauguré une série de matinées fashionables, amusantes du samedi qui, à un juger par le des séances déjà données, promettent un très heureux succès. On a surtout remarqué l'illusion expérimentale de M. Pepper sur les thallium, sur les merveilles de l'analyse spectrale et les pas qu'elle a eu à la découverte de nouveaux métals. Une raison du bon monde qu'elle devait recevoir, la galerie avait été tapissée et décorée avec goût de plantes exotiques rares. Comme Intermède, on avait choisi la fraîcheuse, qui n'a rien perdu de sa fraîcheur et de son attrait, et triple point de vue musical, optique et humoristique. La semaine dernière, LLAA, RR, le prince ou la princesse duquel une fonte une visite privée à cet incroyable établissement, et elles ont voulu qu'on les initia au mystère du fantôme. Monsieur Pepper n'a pas cru pouvoir mieux répondre à la désir confessant apparaître, sous forme du spectre, à la grande surprise, une des personnes même de leur suite. Depuis que ce petit article apparaît dans les journaux anglais, notre ami, Monsieur Pepper, est venu installer à Paris, au Théâtre impérial du Châtelet, le mystérieux appareil avec lequel il a réalisé ses apparitions fantastiques. De son côté, M. Robin a inauguré samedi dernier dans la salle déjà assez fréquentée du faubourg du Temple. Ces représentations du spectre vivant sont palpables. L'attention publique a été vivement excitée. Il nous semble que le moment est venu de rappeler à l'article suivant assuré par nous dans le Cosmos de 1858, tome 13, page 563, et qui ne fut pas assez remarqué parce que le moment n'était sans doute parvenu. Fantômes optiques, M.M., Dirks et Pepper ont inventé nos charmantes dispositions optiques à l'aide de laquelle il fait apparaître des spectres du produit illusions singulières. Il partage en 12 compartiments, pour une large glace s'entend, comme on fait beaucoup aujourd'hui, la salle dans laquelle la scène doit se jouer. Dans le premier compartiment, en avant, il place les acteurs dont on eut dû voir que les images, destinées à représenter les spectres du revenant. Dans le second compartiment, à droite, il installe les acteurs qui doivent voir des revues en personne. Le spectateur s'est installé dans l'obscurité, au-dessus premier compartiment en avant. Dans cette disposition, évidemment, si la scène commence, les spectateurs verront directement, à travers la glace, les acteurs du second compartiment. Elles verront par réflexion seulement, ou d'ailleurs les images formées au sein du premier compartiment et mêlées aux acteurs vus sans personne. Les acteurs situés au-dessus d'eux dans le premier compartiment. Ces images réfléchies, beaucoup moins lumineuses, feront l'effet d'ombre vivante d'être revenus de l'autre monde, ou pourra les faire avancer, rétrograder, sortir ou rentrer, à travers les murs, en faisant varier les distances à la glace des acteurs qu'elles représentent, ou l'une obtendre des effets vraiment extraordinaires. C'est tout récemment une excellente idée. C'est bien aussi la lue secrète de ce photographe esprit dans l'Amérique, où l'initiative était un temps fait de bruit. And now Mr. Dirks, who had hitherto been most friendly to me, began to be otherwise, and to write me offensive letters, which I forbear to publish. Every morning and evening at the Royal Polytechnic I mentioned his name as a co-inventor. The daily program always contained his name, and I can appeal to numbers who know me well that I have never attempted to borrow other people's honors from them, and if a discovery was made, always gave to the person making it full credit for the same. It is certain that Dirks's apparatus was comparatively useless, and that he knew nothing of the use of my double stage, and in fact the Solicitor General, Sir Roundell Palmer, declined to grant a patent on Dirks's crude idea, as it was only when he understood the great improvement made by the use of the double stage and the employment of the electric light that he granted, as stated in the copy of the advertisement, at the third hearing the ghost patent, which the Lord Chancellor subsequently ordered to be sealed after great opposition made by several music hall proprietors. It is a very curious fact that the original model, which Horn, Thornwaite, and Wood sent me, was stolen by some person, who in my absence gave a fictitious verbal order as if from the firm named, and I never saw it again. The thief could not, however, have derived much benefit from the robbery, as the model was more likely to lead the possessor in the wrong than the right direction. I suppose the model went to America or Australia, as my imitators in those countries made a terrible fiasco of the ghost when they first attempted to show it. The following notice by a newspaper, of which unfortunately the name was cut off and lost, gives a very fair criticism on the ghost and its inventors. End of section 6.
Section 7 of The True History of Pepper's Ghost. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Read by Claire. The True History of Pepper's Ghost by John Henry Pepper. Part 6. The Patent Ghost. Modern researches in spiritualism have led to one practical result, the discovery of a ghost. Not of an ordinary old-fashioned ghost, appearing in the midnight hour to people with a weak digestion, haunting graveyards and old country mansions, and inspiring romance writers into the mischief of 3-volume novels, but of a well-behaved, steady, regular, and respectable ghost, going through a prescribed round of duties, punctual to the minute. A patent ghost, in fact. This admirable ghost is the offspring of two fathers of a learned member of the Society of Civil Engineers, Henry Dirks, Esquire, and of Professor Pepper of the Polytechnic. To Mr. Dirks belongs the honor of having invented him, or as the disciples of Hegel would express it, evolved him from out of the depths of his own consciousness. And Professor Pepper has the merit of having improved him considerably, fitting him for the intercourse of mundane society, and even educating him for the stage. After having bowed to the public at the Polytechnic Institution, he some weeks ago made his debut upon the boards of the Britannia Theatre in a new and highly original drama entitled The Widow and Orphans, Faith, Hope, and Charity, in which piece he continues to present himself nightly to crowded audiences with the greatest imaginable success. Possibly all Britons do not know where the Britannia Theatre is situated, and it may not be necessary, therefore, to state that it has its place in the metropolitan suburb of Hoxton, inhabited chiefly by toy makers and doll dressers, and marked under the letter N by the Postmaster General. Skeptics may smile at the idea of a patent ghost making his first appearance in a neighborhood so little fashionable, and so far removed from the residence of Master Home, Commander-in-Chief of Spirits and Mediums, and Solicitor General of Demons, Ghosts, and Shadows of the Universe. It is no mere accident, for it appears that there are good spiritual reasons why the ghost should have come out at Hoxton and nowhere else. Here, in this toy-making quarter, there lived about 100 years ago a worthy citizen and officer of the Lord Mayor, Mr. Francis Bancroft, who was haunted all his life long with the one great idea that his body was predestined to arise visibly from the dead, and to wander over British earth in the shape of a tangible ghost. So deeply impressed was he with this belief that, while walking in the flesh, his chief object was to take measures towards ensuring his safe and speedy resurrection. With considerable faith in the celebrated maxim of Luther's active Roman antagonist, indulgence-selling monk Zeidel, "So bei das Geld im Kasten klingt, die Seele aus dem Fegfeuer springt." As soon as the money rattles in the boxes, the soul jumps out of purgatory. Citizen Bancroft took great care during his mortal career to accumulate a respectable amount of cash with the object of forming a bribe for the guardians of his body. Accordingly, in his will, he left the sum of £28,000 for the establishment of schools and almshouses, with this proviso that his body should be preserved within a shoe glass in the church. During the time I was in Paris and arranging the ghost for exhibition at the Théâtre du Châtelet under Monsieur Holstein, I was surprised to find that the conjurer, Monsieur Robin, was showing the ghost at his séances. My lawyers interviewed him and discovered that, some years before, a little toy had been brought out and patented in France, by which a minister ghost could be shown. It consisted of a box with a small sheet of glass, placed at an angle of 45 degrees, and it reflected a concealed table with plastic figures, the spectre of which appeared behind the glass, in which young people who possessed the toy invited their companions to take out of the box, when it melted away, as it were, in their hands and disappeared. In France at the time, all improvements on a patent fell to the original patentee, and under that law I lost the patent in France, but Monsieur Holstein honorably paid me a large sum of money for the use of my improved ghost at the Théâtre du Châtelet, Paris. Query: had Mr. Dirks' patent agent, in his searches after patents, ever come across the toy invented in Paris? Because it is substantially the ghost apparatus and produced that illusion, and thus it shows how correct are the words of Solomon, who has told us, quote, "There is nothing new under the sun," end quote. If the reader will consult a book written by me entitled Encyclopedic Science Simplified, formerly published by Messrs. Frederick Warne and Co., but now bought and published by Messrs. Lippincott, the great American publishers of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, USA, he will find a very near approach to the ghost apparatus copied from Robinson's Recreative Memories, published in 1831. The same author describes how the famous magician, so-called Nostradamus, deceived even the astute and wily Marie de Medicis by a vision which appeared in a looking-glass. Moreover, Sir Walter Scott, in his beautiful poem, The Lay of the Last Minstrel, has introduced the use of mirrors for producing ghostly appearances, in the vision seen by the ill-fated Earl of Surrey in the mirror huge and high of Cornelius, the vision being that fair and lovely form, the Lady Geraldine. Verses 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, Canto 6. Before traveling about so much, I had a trunk full of letters referring to the ghost illusion, many treating it as a supernatural phenomenon and not as an effect from natural causes. In about 4 months, my secretary wrote at least 1,000 letters in answer to those addressed to me. I was offered house property in exchange for the right to exhibit the ghosts and a full description of the apparatus on attendance at the Polytechnic to see how things were manipulated. I published one of the most amusing letters, which has no address or proper signature, but only in the initials R.C. Quote, whereas the directors and managers of the Polytechnic institution believe and maintain the phenomenon called spirit rapping to be produced by trickery, jugglery, or some natural agency, and to be an imposture, I, the undersigned, on the contrary, maintain that there is some non-human agent which moves the tables, chairs, etc., and carries on an intelligent conversation with spectators by knocking or tilting or other signs. I am ready to wager from £5 to £50 with anyone who chooses to accept my challenge that the phenomenon shall take place, and that no one present shall be able to detect any sort of trickery or jugglery in the matter. It is to be clearly understood that mere opinions that the thing is done by natural agency are to go for nothing. The natural agency must be proved. On the other hand, I defy anyone to produce the same phenomenon by natural agency without my being able to detect that agency. In making this proposal, I wish it to be distinctly understood that I do not place any trust or confidence in the so-called spirits, as I maintain, in opposition to the whole body of so-called spiritualists, that the intelligent agent which moves the tables, chairs, etc., and converses and answers questions by knocking is nothing more or less than the evil spirit which dwells in humanity and is found in every human being. This proposition can be clearly demonstrated. As to the so-called spirits being the souls of the dead, the idea is absurd, and this absurdity also can be made abundantly manifest. This spiritualism is doing an immensity of mischief and ought to be exposed, but it will never be exposed if people shut their eyes to the fact. It will not be the less a fact, and will not the less impose on all who witness it, because there are men and women who predetermine in their own minds that it cannot be true, and refuse to be convinced by either their senses or their understandings. In all ages there have been deaf adders whom no music could charm, and there are in these days also many who having eyes will not see, and who having ears will not hear. On what grounds does any one assume as a certainty that such a thing is impossible? Richard Croone. If any one is so unwise as to be willing to pay £100 in the event of the phenomenon taking place in his presence, and of his being unable to detect any imposture, I undertake that the medium shall exhibit in any private room, in any home, and with any furniture, provided it be not too heavy, and that the said medium shall submit to be searched both before and after the exhibition. Nothing is easier than to lift a table by means of a concealed apparatus. The knocking also may be produced by means of muscular motion or otherwise. But can anyone lift a table without any apparatus, simply by placing the hand on it? Or can anyone contrive an apparatus so cunning that no one present having full liberty to examine everything shall be able to detect it? By collusion or otherwise questions also might be answered. But I maintain that the ancient in spiritualism can tell all the most secret and hidden things of one's life, and even one's secret thoughts, and also that it understands and can converse in any language. I have verified this by repeated experience, but it will not always speak when it is wanted to speak, and the medium has no power over it to make it answer questions. But the fact that it often tells lies and often refuses to tell anything does not make void the fact that it does also at times answer every question which one can ask it. It is by this sort of capricious behavior that it succeeds in completely deluding some to trust in it and others to disbelieve in it altogether. But let a man confine himself at first to the physical phenomenon and try if he can make a table to rise up into the air completely off the ground, simply by placing his hand on it, and without any apparatus whatever. If he cannot do this, and if no human being can do it, let it be acknowledged that there is some non-human agent. A little experience will very soon convince anyone that it is an intelligent and a wonderfully intelligent agent, and then it will remain to be considered whether this intelligent agent is good or evil. I say it is evil. R.C. End quote. End of section 7.
Section 8 of The True History of Pepper's Ghost. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This is chromiumjade. The True History of Pepper's Ghost by John Henry Pepper, Section 8. During the year 1863, when the ghost illusion was one of the topics of the day, the famous George Cruikshank wrote a pamphlet entitled A Discovery Concerning Ghosts, with a rap at the spirit rappers, illustrated with cuts, and dedicated to the Ghost Club. Curious to say, he says nothing respecting the Polytechnic ghost, but is exercised chiefly with famous stories of ghosts and apparitions, which it is alleged to have appeared to various persons. The author examines analytically a number of them, and comes to the conclusion that the person relating them usually deceive themselves or other people, and that most of the stories are mental hallucinations. The inimitable George, as his friends delighted to call him, treats with profound contempt the spirit rappers, and all the cheats and fortune-telling mendicants who try to impose on innocent people with their bad conjuring tricks, people who might have got through the world safely, but the fatal chord is struck, and they go from bad to worse until they end in a madhouse. The whole tribe of persons who made money directly or indirectly out of what they called spirit mediums, etc., fairly howled upon me in the lecture room, and threatening personal violence, I was for some time attended home at night by the most stalwart of our Polytechnic employees. For, like Cruikshank, I vigorously denounced the traders in spirits, founding my arguments on the belief that God was too merciful to us to add to the troubles of this world the fear and trembling brought about by pretended communication with the invisible world. The first story I told at my Polytechnic Strange lecture had a very simple plot. It represented the room of a student who is engaged burning the midnight oil, and looking up from his work sees an apparition of a skeleton. Resenting the intrusion, he rises, seizes a sword or a hatchet which is ready to his hand, and aims a blow at the ghost, which instantly disappeared again and again to return. This ghost was admirably performed by my assistant, who we called Ye Parenge, who, wearing a cover of black velvet, held the real skeleton in his arms and made the fleshless bones assume the most elegant attitudes, the lower part from the pelvis downward being attired in white linen, and the white skeleton ghost assuming a sitting posture, so it appeared to come out of the floor. Although this exhibition only lasted a few minutes, it drew hundreds and thousands of pounds to the treasury of the Polytechnic. In fact, as already stated, I was obliged to remove to the larger theater of the Institute. The next ghost story was told in the large theater, and it illustrated Charles Dickens's story of the haunted man. At the same time was shown Cupid and the Love Letter. When the curtain drew up, a peasant girl was discovered using her spinning wheel and demurely thinking of something not told to the audience. The ghost of a very pretty little boy dressed as a Cupid now appears at her elbow and discharges an arrow from his bow, which pierces the heart of the susceptible village girl. She attempts to caress the pretty Cupid, who eludes her kind advances and is now discovered on the other side. The maiden turns to kiss him, but he is gone. At last relenting, Cupid gives her a love letter from some affectionate swain, which she takes and shows triumphantly to the audience, and leaving the girl to read it, the curtain again descended. These two illustrations of the ghost illusion ran for 15 months without alteration, and were succeeded by many others, viz. Scrooge and Marley's Ghost by Charles Dickens, The Ghost of the Diving Bell, The Night Watching His Armor, The Poor Author Tested, The Ghost of Napoleon I at St. Helena, and The Ghost in Hamlet, pronounced by a leading R.A. as being nearly perfect, only wanting a little different color in the walls of the ramparts, which I adopted with his ultimate satisfaction and approval. The late Walter Montgomery took a great interest in the ghost proceedings, and assisted me greatly in arranging the scenes with due regard to the dramatic art. There is a mystery about his tragic end which deserves solution, and his brother-in-law told me at Brisbane, Queensland, that he did not commit suicide, but was shot by somebody else. The sands of the year 1863 had nearly been run out, and I had taken the ghost to Manchester, to a lecture hall then under the skillful management of Mr. Peacock, when another great success was scored. Various London theatres took out licenses to use the ghost, notably the Haymarket under Mr. Benjamin Webster, the Britannia under Mr. and Mrs. Lane, Drury Lane under Mr. Chatterton, also subsequently and after the famous ghost trial before the Lord Chancellor. The music halls no longer tried to infringe the patent, but those who required it paid their fees for licenses to do so. The famous ghost trial came on in September at the private residence of the Lord Chancellor Westbury, who very graciously agreed to hear the patent case at once, because his lordship was informed by my solicitor, Mr. Walter Hughes, Jr., that if he could not do so, the Polytechnic ghosts would most likely be swamped by the multiplicity of imitators, good, bad, or indifferent. Accordingly, one cold and chilly day, I went down into Hampshire, accompanied only by my solicitor, Mr. Walter Hughes, Jr., of the firm Hughes, Masterman & Hughes, 56 New Broad Street. On arrival, we were shown into his lordship's drawing-room, where, to my dismay, I found a little army of solicitors and barristers drawn up as if in battle array and sitting in a row against the right-hand wall of the room. His lordship's secretary courteously came forward, and noticing we were somewhat cold, placed chairs for us near the fire, and pulled up a table for our use on which to take notes. We all rose respectfully when the Lord Chancellor entered, and, being requested by him to remain seated, the case was opened by his lordship, asking who appeared for the plaintiffs, the music hall proprietors. At least 4 answered, "I do, my lord," and we in the minority could only give an answer from one voice, viz., that of my then young solicitor. The music hall people came down with 2 newspaper reporters to record their certain victory over me, but which, as it turned out, was a mistake because the reporters could only tell the truth and record the verdict given in my favor. The Lord Chancellor, so far as I can remember, and I have no notes, then addressed the plaintiffs. First, I shall require you to show cause by what right or authority you appear before me this day. Second, I will hear you on the general merits of the case. Third and lastly, on the novelty which the defendant seeks to have completed under the protection of a patent, and which novelty you appear to deny. One of the barristers then arose, and after saying that he would bow with submission to anything his lordship might suggest or rule, commenced his argument by calling attention to the fact that the number of days allowed by the patent law had already elapsed, and by section so-and-so I had lost the opportunity of getting the patent sealed within the proper time allowed between granting provisional protection and sealing the patent. After he had ended, the Lord Chancellor asked if the plaintiffs, through their counsel, had anything more to urge on this first point. They all bowed and said no. His lordship now said, "It is very true what you state respecting the wording of the Patent Act, but if you turn to the section so-and-so, you will find that the law officers of the Crown have full power to grant an extension of the time for completing and sealing the patent on the proper application of the defendant's solicitors. And as that application has already been made and granted, it must be evident that, though the defendant exceeded the time usually allowed, he had full permission to do so from the constituted authorities. I will now hear you on the general merits of the case." Here the learned counsel exhausted his law and rhetoric in making out that there was really nothing to patent, for who could catch hold of a ghost? And more legal technicalities were advanced and argued than I can remember at this distance of time, viz. 26 years ago. However, his lordship again asked, "Have you anything more to urge on this point?" and received the same reply, "No, my lord, we have not." The Chancellor then replied in extenso, exposed all the sophistries of the arguments, while complimenting the counsel on his learning and the care which he had bestowed upon the case, said again that there was nothing in the arguments that militated against the sealing of the patent. Of course they could take action at common law, and try the case before the judges appointed to try such cases if they thought proper, and, supported by affidavits resulting from the trial at common law, could bring the case again before him. There was one point which the Lord Chancellor alluded to. He said, "Great stress has been laid at the impossibility of patenting a mere intangible nothing, viz., a ghost, but as he understood, the defendant did not patent the shadowy result called the ghost, but an apparatus for exhibiting dramatic and other performances, and without this apparatus, no ghost could be rendered visible to an audience. His lordship then continued, I will now hear you on the novelty of the proposed invention, which your affidavits declare is not new, but an imitation of something already exhibited. The learned counsel now made various statements, supported apparently by affidavits from persons who alleged that they had seen the ghost a long time before and, in fact, had used the very same apparatus I had employed or words to that effect. For instance, an old playbill emanating from the old Tivoli Gardens, Margate, not perhaps the most refined place of entertainment. In fact, no ladies appeared to visit the place, say in 1851, when I heard a lady in tights discourse a song, the burthen of which was, Take care, John Bull, or you'll be done, in the great exhibition of 51. The playbill was laid upon his lordship's table, who, taking hold of it, asked, Is this the playbill alluded to? And threw it on the floor. I suppose the counsel was not attending to some point of etiquette, and ought to have produced his playbill in the form of a High Chancery Court affidavit. The playbill was alluded to a ghost that was to be shown, and counsel again called attention to their plan of the ghost apparatus, which he was instructed to say was the same or very similar to that used by the defendant. The affidavit of some other dramatic professional was also brought forward with several others, but all things come to an end, and at last the distinct question rang out, Have you anything more to urge on this question of novelty? With the answer as before, No, your lordship. Lord Westbury commenced by alluding to the drawing brought forth by the plaintiffs, and said, I have examined the affidavit and the drawings, and finding it as nearly possible a copy of the defendant's own drawings deposited in confidence in the archives of the Patent Office, and when I visit that establishment, will take care to inquire who has presumed to allow the plaintiffs permission to copy the defendant's original drawing of the apparatus used to show the ghost. I well remember, continued his lordship, being taken to the house of Belzoni, the distinguished traveller, and seeing an effect no doubt somewhat similar to that produced by the defendant's apparatus, but I could not for one moment compare the toy of Belzoni with the refined and complete contrivances used by the defendant at the Royal Polytechnic. An affidavit has been put in by the plaintiffs, sworn to by a person calling himself Nigger Minstrel. He is elsewhere denominated an Ethiopian serenader, who had seen the defendant's ghost years ago. A very respectable man, no doubt, in his vocation, but to put the evidence of such a person against the affidavits of Michael Faraday, Sir David Brewster, and Professor Whiston is a manifest absurdity. I therefore rule that the Great Seal of England be at once attached to the defendant's patent, and that the plaintiffs do pay the costs. After certifying for the costs, and having a little conversation with my solicitor and self, and we all went back to town. The reader can imagine my feelings of joy at the successful upshot of this trial, when he learns that I had already received large sums for licenses, which I must have refunded if the case had gone against me. For many years the ghost at the Polytechnic pursued its successful career, and earned £12,000 in a comparatively short space of time. I received an illuminated address of thanks, with a handsome honorarium from the directors, and subsequently they presented my bust in marble to my late dear wife, with a letter from the Reverend J.B. Owen, M.A., the highly gifted chairman of the old Royal Polytechnic. Very few persons could understand how the ghost was produced, although many persons wrote about and explained it. Even the distinguished philosopher, Michael Faraday, when I took him behind the scenes, said, with his usual love of truth, Do you know, Mr. Pepper, I really don't understand it. I then took his hand and put it on one of the huge glass plates when he said, Ah, now I comprehend it, but your glasses are kept so well protected I could not see them even behind your scenes. End of section 8. Section 9 of The True History of Pepper's Ghost. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. This is Chromium Jade, The True History of Pepper's Ghost by John Henry Pepper. Metempsychosis. Since The Ghost was produced at the Polytechnic years ago, the author has visited America and seen not only the chief cities of the United States of America, but also those of patriotic Canada, and about 10 years ago, paying a casual visit to Messrs. Walker, the eminent organ builders, he inquired of Mr. James Walker what he had done with a model shown him during the height of the popularity of The Ghost, by which an empty glass goblet, or one full of water, was gradually filled with, or changed into wine, or colored water resembling it, thus unwittingly and apparently embodying or putting into illustrated form the miracle of the conversion of water into wine. I was too busy and too well paid at the time to think of a new illusion, but I praised it much, and said if not confined to too small stage limits, it was certainly as good, if not better, than the ghost illusion. The time has now arrived when the London world was ready for something new, as commercial men would say, in the ghost line, and although Mr. James Walker, with the modesty of a truly scientific man, disclaimed the merit due to his invention, he did at last, at my request, throw himself with the author heart and soul into the production of the new illusion which we called metempsychosis. We now took out a patent for the new optical wonder, and having thus secured the invention from that piracy and robbery which too often dog the otherwise successful steps of inventors, causing nearly every patent to be called by the legal fraternity ademnos heredatus, we looked about for a good place, hall or theater, where the illusion could be started. None better could be thought of than the old Royal Polytechnic, where we offered at a moderate sum per week to produce it, paying for every stick, decoration, or engraved looking-glass ourselves. But it appeared that the funds of the institution were so reduced, it was supposed, by the immense expenditures on armies, warlike material, and ladies' legs required to produce a work emulating friend Barnum's gigantic Nero, and called, with an alarming stretch of imagination, The Siege of Troy or Destruction of Troy, that the directors were unable to guarantee the weekly salary Mr. James Walker and myself demanded. Luckily for us, a percentage on the gross receipts was suggested and brought in a great deal more money to our exchequer than the modest weekly salary would have given us. The public came in goodly numbers to see the new optical wonder, and all went well as long as the author remained in London and could devote his time and energies to the daily exhibition. But the time was now drawing rapidly near when, according to contract, he must leave for Australia. Professor Pepper has invariably told his numerous patrons that although obliged to keep secret for a reasonable time all optical illusions that he produced, he would ultimately tell the public all about it. The metempsychosic era at the Polytechnic in 1879 was marked by the production of various stories, which were nicely edited and corrected by a lady of well-balanced, tasteful, and poetic mind, viz., Miss Walker, the sister of the author's very able coadjutor. The entertainment opened with a vacant stage, disclosing a sort of inner apartment about 12 feet square, tastefully upholstered, and closed by a curtain which could be lowered at pleasure, without interfering with the great roller and white curtain upon which dissolving views were shown. The author's adopted son, for he never had any children of his own, was now seen walking through the inner apartment to the footlights, where he bowed, and addressing the audience, had hardly got as far as the words, "Ladies and gentlemen, I am sorry to inform you that something has detained Professor Pepper," when my voice was heard crying out, "Stop, stop, I am here," and appearing out of nothing and without the aid of trap-doors or descent by the help of the copper wires, the author stood in the midst and bowed his acknowledgments for the hearty greeting kindly given him by his audience. The entertainment now proceeded, and after apologizing for the gloom he was about to cast upon the meeting by the harassing story he was about to relate, finally stated that his subject would be those fearful bags of mystery called sausages, remarking incidentally that though, thanks to government analysts, many persons had heard of the examination and the analyses of this dietetic refresher of the inner man, no one probably had ever seen sausages put together again, as it were, and formed into the very animal from which they were originally adduced. A large white dish of sausages was now produced. They were placed in a wire basket, such as pot plants are suspended in from windows and verandas, and hung up in the inner chamber. About 1 minute elapsed. The sausages were gone, and out of the basket came the author's dear little sagacious white poodle, with his blue ribbon and little bells, wagging his tail, barking at the audience, and coming down to lick the hand of his master. The poor little creature was accidentally poisoned by eating bits of meat the rats had dropped while scuttling to their holes to die of the too rapid poison prepared by the author for those pests of domesticated people. Then the metamorphoses proceeded. Oranges were changed into pots of marmalade and given away to the boys, and a chest of tea was converted into a tray carrying a steaming teapot, sugar, milk, cups of tea, and handed to the attendants, to the ladies, and the reserved seats only. Such is the blighting influence of cash, which caused the 1 shilling people to be neglected, and the 18-penny reserved seat folks to have their teas. The ghost of Banquo in Macbeth and the ditto in Hamlet followed, with the curious change of a deserted piano into one at which played and sang a living member of the fair sex, attended by a gentleman in faultless black coat and white tie, who turned over her music and this part. I wound up with the change of a gentleman into a lady, who walked down to the footlights, sang a song, and then vanished into thin air. But all these changes could only happen in the smaller inner apartment. The actors might walk anywhere else at pleasure, and out of the charmed circle Walker could not change to Pepper, or the latter refer to the living beings when they faded out of sight as regular walkers. So much for what was done, and now the anxious reader is getting impatient, and if a lady is doubtless curious, the poor men never are so, to know how it was all done, and as the illusion has apparently left the domain of optical science and is now relegated to the conjuring profession, the author has no hesitation in fulfilling his long-ago promise made to the public to let, as Mr. Kramer, Jr. says in his most amusing book on conjuring, the cat out of the bag. Before the illusion can please the eyes, the proper apparatus for producing it must be constructed, and the key to the result consists in the use not of clear plate glass employed in the ghost illusion, but of engraved silvered glass. Ordinary looking glass, such as is used for common mirrors or looking glasses, is usually made by attaching an amalgam of tinfoil and quicksilver to one side of a clean sheet of plate or other glass. Glass prepared in this way cannot be successfully engraved, and when the chisel or other tool is drawn with pressure across it, it is liable to chip, and instead of clear, sharp engraved lines being obtained, they are ragged, and in most cases, large patches of the amalgam are torn off. This is not the case when glass really silvered by successful chemical processes is used, and when pure metallic silver is precipitated on the surface of the best and flattest plate glass. When Mr. Walker and myself commenced our experiments in March 1879, the so-called patent silvered glass was expensive, confined to moderate-sized pieces of plate glass. Our first care, therefore, was to construct a table that could be brought by screws to a perfect level, and one that would carry a plate of glass at least 12 feet 6 long by 6 feet 8 wide. Such a plate, being more carefully cleaned and quite free from grease, was placed upon the table and leveled by means of spirit levels, just as a plate of glass used for the old collodion process would be leveled, in order that the fluid should not run off at one edge, leaving the other comparatively dry. And now came the knotty part. Which was the best silvering process to use? On consulting the best records of this art, we found valuable information in the English Mechanic, Volume 21, number 542. The reader will find the following process very successful if minutely carried out in all its technical details. To silver glass. Prepare 2 solutions. 1. Argentic nitrate is dissolved in distilled water and ammonia added to the solution till the precipitate first thrown down is almost entirely redissolved. The solution is filtered and diluted so that 100 cc's contain 1 gram of argentic nitrate. Nota bene, 100 cc are equal to rather more than 3.5 fluid ounces. 2. 2 grams of argentic nitrate are dissolved in a little distilled water and poured into a liter of boiling distilled water. 1.66 gram of Rochelle salt is added, and the mixture boiled for a short time till the precipitate contained in it becomes gray. It is then filtered hot. The glass, having been thoroughly cleaned with 1 nitric acid, 2 water, 3 caustic potash, 4 water, 5 alcohol, and lastly distilled water, is to be placed in a clean glass or porcelain vessel, the side to be silvered being placed uppermost. Equal quantities of the 2 solutions are then mixed and poured in so as to cover the glass. This should be done while the glass is still wet with distilled water. In about an hour, the silvering will be completed. Then pour off the exhausted liquid, carefully remove glass, wash in clean water, rub off silver where deposited where not required, allow to dry, and varnish silver side with any thin varnish which does not contract much in drying. The time required for the operation depends on temperature. If the solutions be warmed to about 30 degrees centigrade, the silver is deposited in a few minutes, but it is safer to use them cold. The inside of test tubes, bulbs, etc. are silvered by putting the solution into them, no second vessel being then required. Throughout the whole operation, the most scrupulous cleanliness is the grand essential. 100 cc are equal to rather more than 3.5 fluid ounces. 1 gram is equal to 15.432 grains. 1 liter is equal to 35.25 fluid ounces. The plate of glass, being thus carefully silvered, is allowed to dry thoroughly and is finely varnished with a good thick varnish containing plenty of red lead, so that the back surface of the silver mirror has a smooth and red appearance, while the varnish protects the delicate film of metallic silver. An ordinary photographic picture on glass is really represented by precipitated metallic silver, but the metal in this case is minute particles which do not shine or reflect light. The silvered plate is now engraved in the following simple manner. Being placed in a support or rack against the wall, and quite upright, a chisel, or rather a series of chisels, are drawn across the surface in straight lines and perpendicular by the use of a large T-square. Every time the chisel is drawn with pressure across the varnished back of the glass, a portion of the silver is removed, leaving a straight line quite clear or transparent, and in fact laying bare the surface of the plate glass. The lines were ruled in 3 degrees of comparison: thick, thicker, thickest, and considerable skill and experience, which no description can teach, were required to get these correctly engraved. A, B, C, D, the plate glass. E, straight lines engraved on the silver side and gradually increasing in thickness from E to F. The engraved silver plate moved through a groove in the woodwork at the top of the chamber and was supported below on a beautiful carriage, the wheels of which were covered with vulcanized India rubber rings, and moved on a tramway below the floor of the room perpendicularly. The glass could be made to slide at an angle of 45 degrees, and as it always made a rumbling noise while moving, the music of the band concealed that defect. The ground plan of the apartment is shown on the opposite page. Some idea of the cost of making a full-sized apparatus with hangings and curtains and engraved glass may be gathered from the fact that the author's outfit for Australia with a certain number of dresses cost £327, 12 shillings 1 pence. Whilst the author was travelling through Australia, Mr. James Walker, with his great inventive genius, made a further improvement, by which the concealed figure at K was done away with, and the whole apartment thrown open to the public gaze. This was done to illustrate a clever sketch written by Mr. Burnand called Curried Prawns. Ground plan of chamber. A, A1, A2, A3, floor of the apartment. B, groove at an angle of 45 degrees in which the glass moved. A2 to C groove continued outside of the apartment used when the glass was moved away. E, F, G, H, short flight of 3 or 4 steps, as the room must stand some distance from the floor to allow of carriage moving on tramway. Nota bene. The groove A to C was concealed from the audience by handsome curtains, which were repeated at the same angle on the other side from M to D. K. Place where the objects to be reflected in the looking-glass were placed, but quite concealed from the audience with a door, closed when the exhibition was going on. A, C, D, E are outside of the room, 12 feet square, engraved glass running from HA to AD. The wing EG is placed square. This is an immense advantage, as it renders unnecessary any counterpart at C and N, and as of course it cannot be seen from the light from the footlights on EG is not seen by reflection at CN. When the wing EG was at the same angle as HA, this was always a weak point in the illusion, as when the glass crossed, the reflection of EG, unless very dimly illuminated, always showed. Now it does not matter when EG is placed as in drawing. The frontage to the audience, instead of being AF, is now extended to E, i.e. 12 feet. Consistently, the return sides FE and CB can be removed. This plan, of course, precludes the use of trick chairs, baskets, etc., etc., but it has a good many other advantages in its favor. For with a sociable in the middle of the room, made in 2 exact halves, these halves trick or cover one another when the glass is pushed across, and of course this movement is not seen by the audience. Then any person or persons can be made to appear gradually, sitting or standing, at L or M, right in the middle of the wide open room. Mr. Walker tried this effect at the Polytechnic Institution, and it was capital. The ensemble is more imposing. This plan of showing the illusion is the plan for the stage, as the necessity for darkening the stage in front is nearly wholly avoided. The back of the side wing IK can be painted black, so that its reflection shall not be seen. In lieu of the gas jets, as now arranged, there is a gas lamp. This is placed on a pedestal or small table. The shadow of the sociable to a great extent covers or hides the path along which the glass travels. Mr. Walker says, "I thought out this way for Mr. Irving's necessities, but I did not hear anything from him, and it has come in well from Mr. Burnand's sketch, which has been produced." In this sketch, a gentleman afflicted with dyspepsia through eating curried prawns, the name of the piece, calling on some friends where he has promised to help them in some amateur theatricals, looks at the different costumes of Mephistopheles, Faust, and Marguerite, and throws them carelessly on the seat at M, walks down the steps, which we shall double in width. The glass now crosses, and whilst in a fit of melancholy, he wonders if Mephistopheles will appear. Sure enough, he does. Mephistopheles then comes down in front, and with incantations makes, successively or together, Faust and Marguerite appear. They then disappear in the same manner. The author's friends and public all know how steadily he has opposed the so-called spiritual deceptions, which generally are not half nor a quarter as clever as the tricks of a first-rate conjurer. Punch instructs us what to do at a spiritual seance, which, if done, would certainly astonish the person performing the part of the materialized spirit. Punch writes, "How to behave at a spiritual seance. Always try to hit the happy medium." The author thought the time had now arrived when a new generation who knew not the ghost might be interested in its revival, and with that idea the authorities at the present Polytechnic concurred, so that by the time these pages are read, it is hoped that the ghost will be in full career once more, and if the author only receives a 10th part of the great patronage he received in 1863, he will be amply repaid for all his exertions in reproducing the ghost illusion. And he desires thankfully to acknowledge the very kind help he has received from Robert Mitchell, Esquire, the secretary and manager of the numerous classes and useful lectures now so well conducted at Mr. Quinton Hogg's Polytechnic. The author hopes to show something new at the Polytechnic, and a lady in miniature, as it were from Lilliput, dances on a silver waiter held out by the author, and the great man Napoleon I, for whom, like Alexander the Great, the world was too small, stands in the palm of the hand of the author. If duffers, etc., did not exist, the illusion would be explained to the public, but 10 years need not elapse before they know all. Finis, printed by Cassell & Company Limited, La Belle Sauvage, London, E.C. End of The True History of Pepper's Ghost by John Henry Pepper.